Good day, everyone. Welcome to another week, another chapter here in the textbook, and we'll be covering the first of two chapters on the article, often called the definite article, but actually what this textbook says is that it shouldn't be called the definite article because there is no indefinite article in Greek. Okay, there is only one article, so really what we think of as the definite article, that is putting sort of an English definition onto this. There really is no indefinite article a or an in Greek, and so this is the only one that you get, this article. Okay, but this is the one that we call the definite article. It's what we translate as the in English. First year Greek, I tell everyone, yeah, this is one of the ways that you can tell people that Greek is difficult. There are 24 ways to say the. All right, so this is what we're talking about. The primary sort of force, or the primary meaning behind the article, it's not really to make something definite, okay, to point something out or to tell people, this is the one that we're talking about. The book says that the primary force of the article is to conceptualize. Okay? What this means is, it makes something into a thing. For example, the word poor is given as an adjective. Okay? It's a descriptive type word, but adding the article makes it the poor. And so therefore that turns this description into an idea, or a concept, or a thing. And so that is the primary meaning of the article when it is used. There are some other uses of the article, though. One of them is, in fact, to make things definite. All right. Another use is to identify, sort of point something out, either as an individual, point out an individual in a group, or to identify a class of things. All right, and so that's kind of a large scale overview of what the article is doing. Now, I was really kind of stuck on how to introduce this chapter, or what exactly to do with this chapter, because most of the uses of this, it's not super technical or difficult. It's not like, for example, the genitive or the dative, where there's lots of different words that you have to use to translate this. With this article, a whole lot of them are just sort of the. Okay, but we'll go over a few of these. There were some of the things in the book that stood out. All right, let's go over this first one. One of the major uses of the article is actually as a pronoun. Okay, it can be substituted for a pronoun. Specifically, as you see here on the first point, it can be substituted for a third-person personal pronoun. Okay, and those are the personal pronouns in Greek. Okay, you have the masculine, feminine, and neuter, so that's he, she, or it. These must be in the nominative case. All right, so anytime the article is standing in for a pronoun, it's going to be in the nominative, so it will be the subject. A couple of examples here. All right, from Matthew chapter 15, ha de apokrythes apen. All right, right there at the beginning of that sentence, you have the article ha. Okay, and so when we're translating it, de is of course a post-positive, and so that's going to be translated first, even though it comes second in the Greek. Okay, so but, and then but he. Okay, it's not but the, okay, not but the answering, it's but he answering. All right, and just kind of the context will tell you, it doesn't really make much sense to say but the answering said. Okay, yeah, but he answering said. This kind of being the subject of that participle. Okay, The next example there, John chapter 4, verse 32, Hade apen autois, okay, but he said to them. This one's, yeah, really kind of clear, okay. You wouldn't say, but the said to them, okay, yeah, this is an article that is standing in for a pronoun, okay, he. It's masculine singular, so therefore it's he. If it was feminine singular, you could say she. Of course, neuter, then it. All right. So yeah, in certain contexts, this is not super common, okay, but it appears enough, particularly in the Gospels. This is done, okay, or in other narratives. I think, you know, if they don't want to be repeating that pronoun over and over, they will sort of revert back to just using the article to stand in for it. All right, that is the personal pronoun. Now, let's move on to another use, which is the relative pronoun. If you remember the relative pronoun, we talked about it relatively late in first year Greek. Okay, I think it was like in chapter 22. So it was in the final quarter of last year. But a relative pronoun is translated as who, whom, or what. This introduces a relative clause. Okay, and so a relative clause is an entire clause which sort of describes or clarifies another noun. Okay, the article can be used similar to the personal pronoun. The article can be used as a stand-in for the relative pronoun. The book notes that this is often before genitive phrases. Okay, you know, of the mayor of the town or something like that, okay, or also prepositional phrases, and we'll have a look at one of those. Actually, both of these examples are before prepositional phrases. Okay. You do not really need this for translation. You don't need to stick a relative pronoun in there. You could just leave it out completely, but you know, the Greek authors, they had a reason to put it in, and the reason was to sort of clarify what they're talking about. Okay, just kind of restate that or give it a bit more emphasis. Look at this first example here, very famous from Matthew chapter 6, verse 9. This is the very beginning of what we call the Lord's Prayer. So, Pater himon ha en tois uranois. Okay, our Father who is in heaven. You know, King James English, if you probably memorized it that way, our Father who art in heaven, our Father which art in heaven. Yeah, in modern sort of English, our Father who is in heaven. Now, notice, first of all, you don't really need that relative pronoun there, right? It's still proper English to say just our Father in heaven. But the who sort of slows the whole thing down. It restates that, you know, Father, and yeah, just clarifies, okay, just exactly who we're talking about. Notice again, this is before a prepositional phrase, en tois uranois, okay, in heaven. Okay, so yeah, our Father who is in heaven. That entire relative clause there, okay, just modifies Father. Okay, it describes, you know, it puts a description on our Father. Okay, it tells you, yeah, you know, this is not an earthly Father, you know, biological Father. This is our heavenly Father. In other words, God who is in heaven. Philippians chapter 3, verse 9, me ekon emen dikaiosunen tein ek namu. Okay. Tein is the article there, and notice that tein is just kind of sitting off by itself. Okay, what immediately follows is a prepositional phrase. Okay, so this is saying not having, me ekon, not having, emen is a possessive pronoun, okay, my. And so not having my own righteousness, okay, or a righteousness of my own. And then here's the article that's being used as a relative pronoun. Okay, the tein, you can translate it which, and then ek namu, which is from the law. All right, this is all sort of modifying or describing righteousness, that relative clause is talking about the righteousness. Which righteousness is we're talking about? The righteousness which is from the law. Okay, the of my own is also telling you something about that too. But yeah, you wouldn't say not having a righteousness of my own the from the law, right? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to just translate that article as a definite article, the. Okay, and so you have to make that do something else. Okay, and so yeah, this in this case the relative pronoun, okay, which. Another way to think about this is to indeed translate it with the definite article, but you can say like the one. Okay, so our Father, the one in heaven, or not having a righteousness of my own, the one from the law. Okay, but that gets a little bit cumbersome, and it's kind of it just doesn't sound right in English. Not having a righteousness of my own, the one from the law. It's much smoother and nicer to just translate a relative pronoun there. So yeah, the article can be used as a relative pronoun. I believe that it actually started out, the article actually started out as a pronoun, a pronoun form, but then it kind of got shortened and it kind of became used as this article. One last way that it is used as a pronoun, okay, a possessive pronoun. The article typically does not indicate any kind of possession, but as you see here, okay, in some contexts it can be used to indicate possession, especially when it's just kind of sitting off there by itself. Okay. One strange, kind of quirk of Koine Greek is that it oftentimes uses the article when it's referring to human anatomy. Okay. Body or mind or soul or any kind of a thing like that. Okay. This is the first example there is a good example of that. Okay, Romans 7:25. Ego to menoi duluo namo theu. Okay, the to there, you can see right after ego. Okay, it's kind of a strange usage of this. Okay, and you have here, I serve the law of God with my mind. Okay, you could say I serve the law of God with the mind, but saying my mind actually does a lot to clarify that. All right, I serve the law of God with the mind. Okay, whose mind is it? Which mind exactly? Yeah. So yeah, in this case, I serve, and so it's kind of got that first person connotation already, and so yeah, you can put in my. If it was second person, you serve the law of God, you could certainly put in the second person pronoun your. Okay, the article does not have person, so you kind of have to get it out of the context of the sentence. Here, Matthew 4:20, that's a good example of that, kind of taking off on that. Hoide eutheos aphentes taditua ekolutheson auto. Okay. Immediately, eutheos, they left their nets, okay, and followed him. The nets there is taditua. Okay. You could say immediately they left the nets and followed him, but there makes it much clearer. Okay, and here is third person. Okay, they left, and so you substitute in their nets. All right, yeah, so each of these examples here, these pronouns, it's that the article can actually stand in for different types of pronouns. Okay, the personal pronoun when it is nominative, especially. Then you can have the relative pronoun in certain uses and the possessive pronoun in others. Fortunately, these are not very common because there actually is a relative pronoun in Greek. So, if the author wants to put a relative pronoun in there, they will often use just the Greek relative pronoun. The same with the possessive pronoun. Okay, there is a possessive pronoun an actual proper possessive pronoun. You can also make anything possessive by making it into the genitive case, right? But yeah, sometimes they will use the article. I'm not exactly sure why they would use the article to do this when there are other words that are much clearer in use. But yeah, just be aware if you're translating along and you come to a sentence like Romans 7:25 and it just it just doesn't sound really right. It doesn't have kind of that punch or impact that it needs. I serve the law of God with the mind. Yeah, you can put in a possessive pronoun there. All right, moving off from these pronouns and different ways that you can substitute in these words, we come to an actual use of the article. Okay, using the article as actually like what it should be, as an article. Okay. The article, in using it this way, the individualizing article, the article will make distinctions between sort of similar objects, okay, objects of the same class or the same kind, and the individualizing article is like you're taking your finger and just pointing out a certain one, okay, highlighting or emphasizing a certain object or certain objects. Okay. A lot of times you can think about this as pointing out something that is unique. It's not always like, saying this is the only one, but it's pointing out something as being unique or different or exceptional. All right, and it will probably help to go over some of the examples, but just be aware it's kind of like just pointing at something and saying, this is the man. This is the the one that we were talking about. Yeah, the textbook. I went through the textbook, and there are like 8 or 9 of these categories. All of them are translated pretty much like the, and so it didn't seem super interesting. It didn't seem very important that there would be all of these categories. It seemed a bit like I don't know, debating how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, sort of a thing. All right, but I pulled out a few of these categories that might have sort of importance when you're translating and things to think about. Like that's part of what we're doing here in this class this year, is to take just these basic rules of translation that you learned and kind of looking back behind the curtain and saying, like, why is this translated this way, or why is it important? Why is it even important to think about this? Okay, and so I've taken just a few of these categories. Not every one of these categories in the textbook I thought was very important, but here are the ones that I did think that were kind of interesting, or that you might want to take note of. The first of these categories of the individualizing article. Okay, again, all of these uses are sort of pointing out something about a noun or a pronoun or something or some person. The first use of this or subcategory is called the anaphoric article. Anaphoric articles refer back to something that already has been introduced, sort of by name in the story, have been introduced by name if it's a person, or as a category. All right, so yeah, they kind of point back to something that we've already been introduced to. Here is a good example in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, verse 40, it says, "Emenen eke dua hemeras." Okay, he stayed there 2 days. Then you go down a few verses, okay, to verse 43, and it says, "Meta de tas dua hemeras." Okay, after the 2 days. Okay, just again pointing back out to that we were talking about 2 days before. He stayed there 2 days, and now after the 2 days, okay, yeah, referring back to that period of time that we've already been told about. All right, so yeah, anaphoric articles, they kind of point back to something that we've already been told about in the story. All right, the next one, par excellence. I probably didn't say that correctly. Okay, I need to say that with more of a, I don't know what, French accent there. But yeah, article par excellence points out something as the best in the class, or also as the worst. Okay, par excellence, you know, suggests excellence, but actually this can be like the worst thing. Okay? And James 5 verse 9 is an example of that. So this is not something that's good. Okay, talking about people, this passage is talking about like people who are sinning, or they don't really care. They're just kind of going through their lives, and they're just making money, and they don't care about other people. They're trampling on the poor, and they're just like, oh, who cares? They're just the poor. I've got money to make. I don't care about all these unwashed masses or whatever. And James, then, the author of the book of James, says this. Okay, it says, "Idou hakrites praton thuron estaken." Okay, behold, the judge is standing at the door. Okay, this is bad news for all of you who are just, careless about your wealth and don't care what you're doing to people. And so this is like the worst judge, or the worst news. Okay, behold, the judge is standing at the door. Big ominous music plays, and yeah, the judgment is coming. Okay, you think that you've gotten away with this, but behold, the judge is standing at the door. The next use is called monadic, not monastic, or one of these things. Monadic it means it's one, right? Mono, I think mono is from this. Okay, so mono is one or only. So the monadic article identifies like a unique or one of a kind. Okay, this one is one of the most emphatic ones. When you're reading along, you can really put like an emphasis into this one, because this is like saying this is the only one of its kind, and so you should pay attention. All right, John 1 verse 29. John the Baptist is there, baptizing people, and he sees Jesus walking towards him. This is, I believe, the first introduction of Jesus as a person, or as Jesus. Before, in John chapter 1, and you had that translation assignment that you translated John 1 verses 1 through 5, okay, where it's talking about Jesus, but it doesn't call him Jesus. Okay, it says it instead calls Jesus the Word from God, the Word who is with God in the beginning. This verse here, John 1:29, this is the actual first introduction of Jesus, and it comes from John the Baptist. Okay, and he sees Jesus walking towards him, the first time that we've seen Jesus in the story, and John says, "Behold, ide ha'amnas tu theu ha'airon tein hamartian tu kazmu." All right, and you have, "Behold," okay, "the Lamb of God." Okay, and again, you can read it with a lot of emphasis here. "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Okay, really putting an emphasis on this character, who is going to, of course, become the most important character in the Gospel of John, and saying, this is not just some lamb. Okay, it's not just a lamb. No, this is the Lamb of God, and the rest of it, who takes away the sins of the world. Okay, identifying Jesus as kind of the one and only. So pay attention to this guy. The last use here is called the celebrity article. The celebrity article identifies an object that's going to be well known, but is not of any one of these other categories. Okay, it's not par excellence, it's not monadic, it's not anaphoric. Okay, but it is still something that's important. I guess one way of thinking about it is, if it's none of these other ones, you can maybe consider this celebrity article. Let me talk about that some more. Okay, in Galatians chapter 4. the Apostle Paul is using this extended metaphor, and it's kind of hard to follow sometimes. But he talks about the two wives. Really, one of them wasn't a wife, but they're two really wives of Abraham, right? And one of them was Sarah, his proper wife, and the other was Hagar, the slave woman. And Sarah basically gave her slave to Abraham, and said, you know, you should have a child with her because I'm getting old and I can't have a child. Okay, and so Paul takes off on this story, and he uses this image of a slave woman and a free woman, and he kind of like compares, you know, the two, and he's saying, like, you know, when we didn't really know who God was, we were kind of under the law, and it was like, you know, it was like we were enslaved, and so we were like this slave woman, Hagar. But when you really know who you are in Jesus, and you have faith in Jesus, and you know you have salvation by faith, then you're free, and so you're like the free woman, the proper wife, Sarah. He goes into this really complicated, extended metaphor using these two women to illustrate like his problem with the law and trying to get salvation with the law. Okay. And then he uses the article to describe these two. Okay, so the slave woman and the free woman. That article there is actually doing a lot. It's not just pointing out, okay, here we're talking about the slave woman. This is actually like putting a highlighter on that, because again, Paul is probably talking to people who had some kind of a Jewish background. Okay, trying to tell them, you know, that, yeah, you know, you don't get righteous by keeping the Jewish laws and regulations. Okay, you have freedom and salvation in Jesus. But when he uses this story, the Jewish audience would immediately know what he's talking about, right? This is like where they come from. This is Father Abraham, you know, and the origins of kind of that Hebrew/Jewish, you know, race and people. And so when Paul uses this and he says the slave woman, everybody knows who he's talking about. They know the exact story, how everything played out. Okay, and so that's the celebrity article. Okay, this is pointing out that something is well known, and it's just sort of highlighting that and making sure that you know exactly what's going on. You know, we're not just talking about some random slave woman and some free woman. Okay, no, we're talking about the slave woman and the free woman from that story that everybody knows. All right. So yeah, anyway, that is the kind of identifying, okay, individualizing article, pointing out a specific thing as important. All right, now this is the kind of opposite of that. The generic article is the one that, yeah, again, it does the opposite of the individualizing article. Individualizing article points out a specific thing. If you have a group, the individualizing article is like you take your finger and you point out sort of one of that group, a particular member of that group. Whereas the generic article, it takes a class of things. It's looking at an entire group of people or things, and it kind of says, okay, now we're going to take this one class or group, and here's how it is different, or we're going to just point out that it's different from others. Okay. An example that the book gives is the article and noun ha anthropos. Very simple. I hope everybody knows what that is. But this ha anthropos, if you think of the article as being an individualizing article, the way that you would translate this is sort of the human being. All right, and this is a certain human being. There's this whole class of human beings, people, men. Okay, and we're going to point out a certain one. So it's the human being now. The generic article, it would be used in the same way. Okay, you would see this. But if this is a generic article, it would be translated best as sort of humankind, okay, or the human race, or mortals. And this is now saying that it's the class of humankind and it's different to animals. Okay, we're not talking about animals here, and we're not talking about angels either. Okay, we're talking about humankind. Now, even though this is a really good example of why you maybe should not think about this as like the definite article, because often in translation, when you have a generic article, it is best to, if it's singular, to use an indefinite article, okay, a or an, or just don't use any article at all. For example, with humankind, okay, you wouldn't say the humankind, you wouldn't, yeah, in this one, though, you wouldn't even use the indefinite article. You would say a or a humankind or an humankind. Yeah, just don't use an article at all. And so sometimes, yeah, even though we have an article in Greek, it's best to leave it out when you translate it into English, particularly if it's one of these generic articles. One way to know that it is a generic article is to insert or translate that phrase that's right there, okay, as a class after this noun that has the article on it. And if it makes sense, it seems like it fits well, then yeah, you have this generic article that's pointing out a certain thing and saying this thing is not just one thing, but it's like an entire class of things. Okay, here are some examples of that generic article. You see the ha there right in the middle of the sentence. Esto soy, it or he, she, or it will be. To you soy. Hosper ha ethnikos kai ta telones. Okay. As or like a Gentile and a tax collector. Okay. Here, yeah, it's best not to translate this as like as an individual article, right? He should be to you as the Gentile. Well, what Gentile are you talking about? Jesus, okay? Or or the tax collector. We don't have a specific example of a tax collector here. No, this is talking about he shall be to you as a Gentile, and we're talking about the entire class of Gentiles or a tax collector. The class of tax collectors. So here's an example of, even though it's a definite article in Greek, ha, it is actually when you translate it into English, it's best to translate an indefinite article, which is now why we're calling this the generic article rather than the definite article. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12, de ton episkopon anapilemton ani. Okay. The overseer, as a class, must be above reproach. Okay. The overseer, and here's a good example of lots of Greek rules are meant to be broken. The textbook translates this as the overseer. I wonder if it would also be okay to translate as an overseer. Okay. As a class, an overseer must be above reproach. Okay. Overseer in this case is like a minister, or I'm talking about church offices, pastor, leader, okay, overseer. And then Ephesians chapter 5, okay, hoi andres agapata tas gunaikos. Husbands, as a general class of people, love your wives. Okay, not the husbands, not the husband, specific one. No, we're talking about, as a general class, love your wives. All right, this is a fairly significant use of the article. We went over this actually with adjectives, right? Adjectives can be substantive adjectives. Participles, okay? As verbal adjectives, participles can also be used as substantives. The one who reads, the one who, but yeah, they can actually turn just about any part of speech into a noun if you combine an article with, another type of word. It doesn't have to be a noun. The article can be used with pretty much any part of speech. Colossians chapter 3, this ta, that first word ta, there is with ano, and ano is an adverb. Okay? It's an adverb. Above, I believe, is the way that it's translated. Yeah, set your mind, ta anaphroneta. Okay, set your mind on the things above. Me ta epites geis. Okay, not on the things on the earth. Okay, both of these articles are neuter plural, which is why you can substitute in the things. Okay, you can put that in there. The word things is not in the Greek at all, but you can get it because there is an article there, and it's yeah, it's making something substantive. Matthew chapter 6, verse 13, the very end of the Lord's Prayer. Ala rusai hemas apa tu paneru, but deliver us from the evil one. This is now being used with an adjective, evil. The King James Version translates this phrase as deliver us from evil, evil as kind of, this generic, impersonal force, deliver us from evil, but really this should be translated the evil one. It's speaking of a specific person, in this case, the devil, or, the enemy, Satan. All right, but deliver us from the evil one. That article there makes paneru a substantive. Romans chapter 14, verse 19. Ta tes erenes diokomen kai ta tes oikadames. Let us pursue diokomen, the things of peace. Ta tes erenes. If you don't put the substantive in there, it's let us pursue the of peace, which doesn't make a whole lot of good sense, right? But yeah, again, like the first example, ta is the neuter plural, so you can put in things. Let us pursue the things of peace. Kai ta tes oikadames, the things of edification, the things that build people up. We're not trying to tear people down here. All right, so you see those, okay, those articles, they're just kind of sitting out there by themselves. All right, they're not really being used with anything. And in Romans 14, verse 19, it can't be associated with tes erenes and tes oikadames, because those are both genitives. Okay, and so that ta is doing the work of a substantive, or the work of a noun. Okay, and yeah, you get that out of the form of it. If neuter plural, it's things. If it's masculine plural, it can be men or the ones. Feminine singular, right? The woman. Okay, so yeah, you get that out of that article. What is the gender and the number, and then you can decide what kind of a substantive to put in there. All right, what do we do when there is no article? Okay, if there's, noun is just sitting out there by itself, there's no article associated with it. If the noun doesn't have an article, it could simply be indefinite. Greek does not have, again, an indefinite pronoun, a or an. And so if you don't have an article on there, you can put one of those on there, okay, this indefinite article. John 4, verse 7, erketai gune ek tes samareas antelesai hudor. Okay, came to draw water. But who is it? It's a woman, gune. Okay, notice it doesn't say hey gune. It's just erketai gune. Okay, a woman came to draw water. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Because there is no article with gune, we can assume that this is going to be indefinite. Right. Another possibility is that this could be a qualitative use of this non-article, really. Okay, but pointing out that the noun is qualitative. Ha theos agape estin. God is love. Okay, agape in this case is the word that we're looking at. Notice that there is no article with agape, and it's kind of, it's just saying God is love, that in essence of the essence of God, or the nature of God is love. The definite use of this, now that even though there's no article, okay, you can still translate it into English as a definite article, and that, yeah, that's super confusing. I know. Why do they even have it? Why do they even bother to distinguish? Well, when there is no article and the noun is clearly definite, it's going to stress the individualistic identity. Okay, it's saying that this is a particular member, and this then defaults back to what we were talking about for the anaphoric and all that stuff, anaphoric par excellence. Okay, and you need to think about what kind of definite article is this? How is that the being used? What kind of what kind of use of that is going on sort of behind the scenes? Okay, one way to know that something is definite is that proper names are always definite, even if they do not have an article with them. All right, heurisque Philippos ton Nathanael kai lege auto. All right, that first noun there, Philippos, there's no article on it. Okay, but this is not a certain Philip. No, this is Philip. Okay, this is definite. We're talking about, okay, the disciple Philip. All right, the character Philip. Philip found Nathanael and said to him. All right, a proper name does not need an article to be definite. And in English, we don't really say the Philip, but yeah, it's definitely not one of the a or an. It's not a Philip, just a certain Philip. Notice that Nathanael has an article with it, ton. That ton is to point out that this is actually the object. Philip is the one who's doing the finding. Okay? If you did not have an article with Nathanael to tell you that Nathanael is the accusative, the object, then it would get really kind of hairy. Okay, you don't know if it's Nathanael found Philip or Philip found Nathanael, but by putting that article on the second one, it tells you that, yeah, that's the object, that's the accusative. John 1 verse 1, en arche ein ha logos. Again, this was in your translation. In the beginning was the word. In the beginning, en arche. Notice there is no article with arche, but this is likely a monadic translation. Okay, there's only one beginning. There's not multiple beginnings. It's not in a beginning. There's lots of different universes being created or whatever. Now this is in the beginning. There's only one of those, and so we're going to use this as a definite article. Mark 15:25, ein de hora trite kai estaurosan auton. It was the third hour when they crucified him. Oftentimes with ordinal numbers, okay, these counting numbers, first, second, third, yeah, you will end up with a definite article in English, even though there isn't one in Greek. Okay, it was the first, the second, the third. All right, and then in John chapter 6, verse 70, kai ex humon es, actually that's a haste, that's one. So yeah, haste diabolos estin. All right, this is, I think this is another monadic use, similar to John 1 verse 1. Okay. One of you is the devil, referring to Judas. Okay, Jesus is talking about, I've chosen all of you, and then he says, yet one of you is the devil. A lot of English Bibles will translate this, one of you is a devil, but as the textbook points out, the devil in the Gospels is always definite, okay, and it's always personal, and it's always talking about the devil. In other words, like the number one devil, Satan. Okay? And so, yeah, he's referring to Judas here, yet one of you is the devil. But elsewhere Jesus does this, and it's kind of this weird hyperbolic use. When he tells the disciples that he has to go to Jerusalem and be killed, Peter tries to get in his way, and he's like, "Never, Lord, this will never happen." And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Right? not really saying that Peter is literally Satan, but that Peter is thinking about worldly things, not things of God, and he's trying to get in the way of God's will and God's plan. Therefore, he is acting like Satan. In this case here, speaking of Judas, Judas would go on to betray Jesus, and so yeah, he's comparing Judas to the devil, because he's doing the devil's work. Just be aware of that, because in most English translations, it softens this, and it kind of says, yet one of you is a devil. Okay, like there's multiple devils. No, in the Gospels, there's only one devil. There's plenty of demons, like evil spirits going around doing things, but there's only one devil. Okay. Alright, we come to something that is hopefully not too confusing. This fancy name, this person's name, I think, is on this, Apollonius. And Apollonius must have discovered this or stated this. So Apollonius's rule is that if you have a genitive phrase, okay, a noun and a related genitive, something of the something else, okay, you're going to have either both of those nouns are going to have an article, or both of them are going to lack the article. You won't have one with the article and one without it. Okay, that is, again, with a noun and the relative genitive, both the noun itself and the genitive, they will either both have the article or both lack them. Okay. Confusingly, you can have these two possible forms, right? You can have both words with the article or both words without it. The meaning is the same. I was kind of hoping that, it would be that there's a difference in emphasis, or there's a difference, in how we use this. Maybe we're using this, as an object or something. No, the meaning is exactly the same. Okay, whether both nouns have to have it or both nouns have to lack it. Look at that example right under there. Okay, ha logos tu theou. Notice the two words in question are logos and theou. And in the first example on the left, they both have an article, ha logos and tu theou. It's also possible that you could see this said logos theou. In this case, both of them are lacking an article. Okay. Now, in the what makes this important, though, okay, is in the second example, okay, logos theou, if you remember what we were just talking about, even though there isn't an article on either of those words, one of those could be definite. Okay, one of the best way to translate either logos or theou may be to translate a the with them. Okay, and the way that this rule works, if one of those nouns can be shown to be definite, then both of them are. Okay, they're both going to be used the same way. Either both of them are going to be definite, or both of them will be indefinite. Probably the more useful or relevant rule of this, you have Apollonius' rule, and then you have the corollary to the rule. Okay, kind of another way of stating the premise. So with the corollary, it says when both nouns are anarthrous, in other words, when they lack the article, they have the same semantic force. Okay, so that's what we just said. They have to be both definite or both indefinite. You can't have one or one and the other. Matthew 3:16, kai eden pneuma theou katabainon. Well, there's your genitive phrase right there, right? Pneuma theou, that I have underlined. He saw the Spirit of God descending. Okay? Even though we don't say the Spirit of the God, it's understood there's only one God in the in the sort of thinking of the New Testament. Okay, and so God in this phrase is definite. Both of them must be definite. Okay, he saw the Spirit of God descending. Your only option to translate this then would be to say that both of them are indefinite, and then you could, if you translate it that way, it becomes he saw a spirit of a God descending. Yeah, nowhere in the New Testament is it going to say that there's like multiple gods and multiple spirits. Okay, those are not great things if you have a spirit of a god. Okay, in this case, no, it's what we call as Christians the Holy Spirit. Okay, he saw the Spirit of God descending. Both of them must be definite. Acts chapter 7 verse 8, kai edoken auto diatheken peritames. He gave to them the covenant of circumcision. Okay. This is not he gave to them a covenant of a circumcision. Some one out there, a certain one, or this is like he gave to them the covenant. Which covenant? The covenant of circumcision. Both of them are definite. Okay. That is the end of the slides. Go over the quizzes that I sent through. Okay. You should have the Trenchard vocabulary book by now, and you can go over that one. All right. I'll put all of the assignment information in the email there. Okay. But yeah, have that ready in about a week, and I will see you again. I hope everyone is having a good quarter and your online classes are going okay. All right, blessings everyone, and we'll see you again next week. All right, bye.